Listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Well, happy Monday morning, everyone. I want to thank everybody for spending some time with us today. We do appreciate it. Is that better? Okay. I am being monitored and supervised, and apparently I need it.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
We do appreciate everybody that listens, especially this time of year, because let's face it, everybody's busy right now, right? We're getting ready for these holidays that we're in the middle of and all that good stuff. But if you like what you hear, please use those share buttons and all that good stuff. Just makes it easier for people to find us. What are you listening to? It's wintertime and the heater's running, so.
It keeps rotating back to the beginning.
Oh, that's weird, but okay. Hopefully it doesn't do that everywhere. Anyway, as we continue to work out the technical problems, before I get into what I want to talk about today, I guess I need to finish the advertisements, don't I? That might help. If you haven't been to GiveGod90.com lately, you might want to check that out. Author Jerry Mitchell as well, where the books are. Now, before I get into what I want to talk about, I want to respond to a couple of comments I received about the last podcast, because I knew this was going to happen. I was kind of ready for it. People were mildly confused and maybe a little upset. One person asked if Paul wrote that the commandments were a millstone around our necks. Well, that would be quite impossible for Paul to write for a lot of reasons. Paul is a self-proclaimed zealot for the law, right? Because he was studying to be part of the religious leadership, he would have needed to memorize the first 5 books of the Bible. That's, for Christians, the Old Testament. For my Jewish listeners, that's the books of Moses. And in that, he would have learned, I hope, Deuteronomy 30, beginning in verse 11. The commandment I give you today is not too difficult. So let's take a time out right there. If it's not difficult, then how can it be something burdensome around our neck? Let me continue. It's not too difficult for you or beyond your reach. You can do it. Right? We have the example of Yeshua, Jesus, who twice tells people, just go and sin no more. Like it's a offhand thing that's very, very easy to do. Moses continues, it's not in heaven that you need to ask who will ascend to heaven and get it for us and proclaim it, that we might obey it. It's not beyond the sea that you should need to ask who will cross the sea to get it for us and proclaim it, that we might obey it. So it's not that difficult. Had Paul thought the commandments were a problem or an issue, why do we look at his actions and see that he continued to obey them? Paul kept Shabbat. He kept the Sabbath. We see it at least twice in Acts 17 and Acts 18. We know that he kept the feasts. Acts 20 twice. Paul instructed us to keep the feast. That's in 1 Corinthians, his first letter to the Corinthians. Paul believed all of the Torah and the prophets. If you look at Acts 24:14, I do confess to you, however, that I worship the God of our fathers according to the way which they call a sect. I believe everything that is laid down by the law and written in the prophets. So if he believes it and he is a zealot for it, why then would he say, oh, the law's been done away with? It's impossible for him to say that. He would have been stoned. To try and use Paul's writing in a way that says the law's done away with is not either logical or viable. Those arguments are not logical, they're not viable. When we looked at the way he lived, and we understand that he continuously quoted from the law and from the prophets. Now, he may have paraphrased some of the things that Moses wrote, and some of the things that the prophets wrote as well. But that was to help the people that he was writing to at the time to better understand what it meant. He never did claim it was done away with. It would not have passed the Deuteronomy 13 test, and they would have killed him because they would have said, you're a false prophet. Now that I've vented a little bit, I feel much better. Hopefully you understand where I'm coming from with that, though, right? Just because somebody comes up with this, and I'm going to say it, idiotic idea, doesn't mean it's true. We have to look at the evidence. We have to look at it forensically and not guess about what it says. We have to gather the clues and put them together properly. So, on with what I want to look at today. A lot of people have heard or maybe even used the expression, misery loves company. It seems to, doesn't it? Well, misery loves company is actually a common English saying, but it originates from the 14th century. It's in a literary work by a fellow named Dominic de Gravina in Italy, I believe is where it was. Now, it alludes to the idea that when someone is depressed or someone's hurting in some way, they seek out others who are depressed and hurting as well because misery loves company. Now, I've heard the book of Job also referred to as the misery loves company book because of, he was basically, tested drastically. Right? Now, I'm going to say this, and we probably all know somebody who's like this. People sometimes seem to enjoy their misery, whatever it might be. Right? Some people seem to be comfortable in their pain and woe. Right? Some people enjoy having others feel sorry for them or take pity on them. These days, I think they just enjoy all the freebies that they get. Some people may even enjoy the appearance of misery so that they can receive some kind of enablement for their lifestyle. Think about that. What brings up a whole other aspect of misery? It really does. Everybody, nobody wants to see their family or their friends hurt in any way, right? We just don't. We see somebody who is sick, or we see somebody who is emotionally hurting. We see somebody who is going through something. Maybe they've gotten some bad news. We see the fatherless and the widows. We see the homeless, the addicts, the hungry. We want to help. That's what we do. We want to help. We want to comfort someone who has had someone, a loved one in their life pass away. We want to hug them. We want to try to find the right words when there really are no right words. We might try to cheer someone up who's been given bad news. But what they're really looking for is some understanding about what's going on. Sometimes we might want to make somebody feel better before they're ready to feel better. And then there are those who, for whatever reason, never want to feel better. The truth is, we can't fix somebody else's feelings. We can't fix somebody else's feelings any more than we can mend a broken heart, any more than we can change the color of the sky. Right? Our desire to help is admirable. But the reality is, until the one who is in misery has a desire not to be miserable, there's nothing we can do to fix them, in air quotes, because you can't see what I'm doing, right? We can't go into somebody's heart or somebody's mind and magically make them feel better. We can't. It's impossible. Until they're ready, until they have a desire to have some type of healing, we can't. They have to want it. I've known addicts who have said, until I was ready to stop, I didn't want to stop. I know people who have been, downtrodden for a long time. They always had that gray cloud over their head. And he said, until I was ready to change my attitude, nothing anybody said made any difference. And I'm going to use a couple of examples here. Yeshua, Jesus understood that. Now, I want you to listen carefully to what he tells someone after they're healed, if you want to read that first passage.
Later, Jesus went to Jerusalem for a special Jewish feast. In Jerusalem, there was a pool with 5 covered porches. In the Jewish language, it was called Bethesda. This pool is near the sheep gate. Many sick people are laying on the porches besides the pool. Some were blind, some were crippled, and some were paralyzed, and they waited for the water to move. Sometimes an angel of the Lord came down to the pool and stirred up the water. After the angel did this, the first person to go into the pool was healed of any sickness he had. There was a man laying there who had been sick for 38 years. Jesus saw the man and knew that he had been sick for a long time. So Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be well?" The sick man answered, "Sir, there is no one to help me get into the pool when the water starts moving. I try to be the first one in the water, but when I try, someone else always goes in before I can." Then Jesus said, "Stand up, pick up your mat and walk." And immediately the man was well. He picked up his mat and began to walk. The day all this happened was a Sabbath day. John chapter 5, verses 1 through 8.
Okay. Now, did you catch what he said? Pick up your mat and walk. Now, what he didn't say is, "Here, let me help you stand up." No, he didn't say that. What he's telling the person is, you need to be the one to stand up and walk. You need to be the one who gets up on your own. You need to be the one who chooses to get up. You get the picture? We can't help someone who is not willing to receive the help they need. The help they need. This fellow had a desire. He was laying there already. He's like, well, nobody's going to help me in the water. But until he was ready, but until somebody said, "Hey, get up and walk," he didn't understand. Now, here is another example, and this one's a little more drastic.
Again, Jesus felt very sad in his heart. He came to the tomb. The tomb was a cave with a large stone covering the entrance. Jesus said, "Move the stone away." Martha said, "But Lord, it has been 4 days since he died. There will be a bad smell." Martha was the sister of the dead man. Then Jesus said to her, "Didn't I tell you that if you believe you would see the glory of God?" So they moved the stone away from the entrance. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said these things because of the people here around me. I want them to believe that you sent me." After Jesus said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out. His hands and feet were wrapped in pieces of cloth, and he had a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take the cloth off of him and let him go." John chapter 11, verses 38 through 44.
He didn't need to go into the tomb. He didn't get to go shake Lazarus to wake him up. We have another example of this where Elisha lays across the dead child and brings him back. But he didn't need to do that. Yeshua, Jesus, didn't even seem worried about how Mary or Martha would react. He just said, "Hey, get up." Now, I should say here, all right, when a body is wrapped in a traditional fashion that it would have been wrapped in, somebody's going to need to help him out of those cloths, right? So that's why he said, "Take the cloths off of him." It would have been normal. But Lazarus gets up on his own after being called out. Nobody was there to help him up. Nobody was there to take him by the hand and lead him out of the tomb. They had to roll a stone away because he wouldn't have been able to do that. But think about this. He had a desire. He needed that desire to come back. And I'm using these examples to demonstrate how even Yeshua, how even Jesus understood that people need to want to be healed. I didn't even include the story about the woman with the blood, right? We all know she had a desire to be healed. She sought him out. But what Yeshua didn't do was enable their miserable lifestyle by offering them something they didn't need. He didn't tell the fellow laying by the pool who'd been crippled for 38 years, "Oh, just let me get you something to eat. You want a blanket?" He didn't comfort Mary and Martha. He wasn't worried about them. He gave the people what they needed, not what they wanted. When someone's grieving the loss of a loved one, there are no words that we can offer to help them feel better faster. It's something they have to do on their own. We can't fix their feelings immediately, no matter how bad we want to. There's a process they need to go through, and it needs to be done on their time. And sometimes it takes some people longer than others to get over it. Well, I won't say get over it. You never get over it. You just learn to live with it. When somebody's sick or injured, they need time to heal. If you cut your finger, it takes time to heal. Right? If you catch a cold, it takes time to feel better. When somebody receives bad news, they need some time to process that news properly. But they need to do that. We can't do it for them. When somebody's miserable, the last thing they need is other miserable people around them, no matter how much they might want to be around other miserable people. We know people who have gone through cancer treatments and are going through cancer treatments. Some of them seem to have such a negative attitude, it made everybody around them sad. It really did. Other people have a positive attitude, a positive view, positive outlook, and it gives the people around them a more positive outlook as well. You see, no matter what someone might be going through, they're the ones who have to choose joy over pain and anguish. They're the ones who have to get up and walk. Do you really want to help somebody? Give them what they need, not what they want. Oftentimes, that's hope. And hope comes from showing them they can trust the Creator. Not telling them, oh, you just need Jesus. It doesn't work. What they need is to see you in your hope. They need your example. They don't need a crutch. A crutch is what they think they want. What they need most often is hope. Now, when you give somebody what they need instead of what they want, I'm going to be the first one to admit that not everybody's going to love you for doing it. Some people might even hate you for doing it. So what if they do? I have said a lot. There are some people who enjoy their misery so much, you could give them a bar of gold and they'd still be miserable. Help the ones who desire to be helped. Maybe the one you want to help is not the one you're supposed to be helping. They have to have a desire. I've used this example in the past as well. If you're walking down a road and there's a deep hole on either side of the road, and on one side there's a person laying in the bottom of this hole, and he's just laying there going, oh, woe is me, I'm never getting out of here. It doesn't matter what, I will never, ever be able to crawl out of this hole. And on the other side, there's somebody down in the hole, and there's claw marks coming up in the dirt, and he's just digging and scratching and trying to get out. Which one deserves your help? Well, they both kind of do. But until the fellow that's just laying there in his misery and woe is willing to try, even if you pick him up out of that hole, chances are he's just going to jump right back in it. Sad, but true. Seen it done, time after time after time. No one person is able to reach everyone. And that's why there needs to be a lot of people out there willing to do what they need to do, to give people what they need, not what they want. Because sometimes you might not be the one that's going to be able to reach the one that needs your help the most. Sometimes it takes somebody else to get there first. Sometimes it takes somebody else to get there second. But we need to be the example, an example of hope for other people to see. Misery doesn't need company. Misery needs hope. Misery needs something that the person will see and go, oh, I guess I don't have to be miserable all the time. I don't need this cloud over my head all the time. I can be happy. Well, I won't use the word happy. I can be joyful. I know a lot of people who are in pain and misery. They weren't really happy about it, but they kept their joy. Myra's father's a great example of that. In his pain and his weakness and his failing in his last weeks, he kept a fairly positive attitude for most of it. That's not being happy about being sick. That's being joyful that you have hope. Be the one who shows others how to hope. so they don't have to be miserable. Now, Thursday is going to be our last live podcast. And I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do for that. But I do appreciate everybody listening and continuing their prayers and support. We really do.
We appreciate each and every one of you.
As I'm having technical issues. That's what happens when you use headphones with a cord.
We're low tech here, everybody.
Yeah, they'll let anybody have a podcast these days. Anyway, until Thursday.
Until Thursday.
We do wish you many, many blessings, everyone.
Be blessed all. Be safe.